started 9 years old? 9 years old, right? Oh, that's awesome. Yes.
Marbury Dragon, the real flag. Oh, yeah. Real Marbury. The real flag.
Dad.
What happened?
Hello?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'd ask you to take your seats for a minute. And thank you very much for coming out. I just want to, my name's Terry Holliday.
Okay, all right.
And two of us got together. Are you good? There are two of us who got together. Keith Taylor is really someone who really made this thing happen. As you know, we're going to celebrate the Armistice tomorrow, actually. That's Veterans Day. And Veterans Day, which began as Armistice Day and was changed to a national holiday of Veterans Day, I think in 1954, marked the cessation of hostilities in World War I at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, hence November 11th. So we're doing this a day early, and one of the things that we'll do, I'll try to give you a little bit of information, but at about 10:59, we're going to stop, okay, and at 11 o'clock, we're going to ring the bell 11 times, okay, to signify the 11th hour, okay. What we would normally do, you have church bells ringing and everything, but we liberated a bell from my American Legion post, and we're going to go ahead and do that. One of the reasons, a few reasons why we're together on this. The 369th is an infantry regiment deployed with the Allied Expeditionary Force in World War I. And this armistice has a special meaning to the community of Harlem, and we want to recognize that, and that's what this is. We want to observe the armistice. We want to pay tribute to those who sacrificed their lives, and we want everyone to remember these veterans as they remember all veterans. And another one in particular is a fellow by the name of Eugene Ballard. He was a corporal in the French Air Force, but he became a resident of Harlem, and for years nobody knew about him. So it's time that we all knew about him. Hopefully we will be able to take away a few things today, and then we hit our computer and the internet, and you can begin taking a look at some of the things that we're talking about today. We'll only be able to touch base and do some justice to it. But in any event, that's what we're going to do. So somewhere in about another 2 minutes or so, whatever we're doing, we're going to stop. We're going to stop, and we're going to ring that bell. Okay? And just one thing that I would just ask of you, just bear with us a little bit. This is a grassroots effort. We're trying hard. We probably will make a few mistakes, but we'll try to gather ourselves and do it. We're going to end this, by the way, with a reading of the names of the members of the 369th who were killed in action in France in World War I. So we've got 15 readers. You sort of know who you are. There are about 3 or 4 who don't. At the end I'll give you a signal, and we'll ask you to come on up here, and we'll try to get through these names in about a short period of time. I think we're probably going to take about 90 minutes with everything that we're doing, but we'll still do it. Good? What time do we have? We have 10:59. Okay, so we'll hold tight. Can you give him a signal when it's 11?
Take care of it. I'm dead on that cord.
Yeah. And I think it would probably be appropriate if those of us who can stand would please stand as the bells begin to ring.
10 seconds.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please take your seats.
Be careful of this.
that. All right. Okay. Okay. All right, we have a few dignitaries with us today. General Counsel from France, New York City. He's with us. Commissioner Sutton, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Okay. Commissioner Lori Sutton from New Jersey, New York City Veteran Services. I'm sorry, agency. I'm very sorry. And we have a few other dignitaries that will be with us later. General James is with us. He'll speak. Colonel Bosquet, he'll be here. And we have Mark Jaffe from the Greater New York City Chamber of Commerce. And we have a few others. So we'll keep going. All right. Greg Day. Greg Day's going to play taps. Miss Greg. I'm sorry. Yeah, Greg Day playing taps. Okay. We're going to ask everyone to stand. We're going to play taps. Our bugler is Greg Day. Please see. Please have a seat.
Dr. Hartman, are you here? Good morning, everyone. Grace and peace. I'm Jolinda. Good morning. I'm Jolinda Ruth Cogan. Dr. Hartman's not here, correct? All right. So, we're part of the Dorrance Brooks Property Owners and Residents Association. This block, the next block, the block over, and the other block. We're the ones that maintain this park for you. We're the ones that help. And if you like to ever volunteer, that's fine for us. We handed out the yellow bag, and that is the main program and other information for you in the neighborhood. So we're going to pray, so please pray in your own religion. I have everybody bow their heads. Father God, we come boldly to your throne of grace, asking for mercy and grace to help in time of need. Your mercies and compassions are new every morning. This is a new morning. We ask for new mercy, new grace, and new compassion. We thank you and praise you for this country, the United States of America. We thank you and praise you for all those who have served. We thank you and praise you for the World War I heroes, the Harlem Hellfighters, and this Dorrance Brooks, who this square is named after. We thank you and praise you, Father God, for all those who came out today and those who didn't come out but came in spirit. We ask you to give all your blessings to those who have contributed. We thank you and praise you, Father, that whatever anyone needs is met, they're done. We thank you and praise you for this day. And if all of us are in agreement, we said in Jesus' name, amen and amen. Okay. So now I introduce you our president, Dr. Keith Taylor.
I have some prepared remarks, but one of the first things I wanted to do is just let everyone know that Dr. Jennifer Wingate was inadvertently left off of the program, but certainly I want her to know that she's an important part of this observance, and so just to let everyone know. My name is Keith Taylor. I'm a proud member of the New York Guard, assigned as a specialist to the 12th Regimental Training Institute as an instructor. New York Guard is a state volunteer force formed in 1917 to augment and support the New York National Guard planning, training for, and executing state emergency support, disaster missions, among many other duties. But I speak to you today as president of the Dorrance, Brooks Property Owners and Residents Association, which, along with many supporting organizations and individuals, have come here this morning to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the signing of the Armistice Agreement ending World War I, as well as the incredible efforts of the young men of Harlem, the 369th Infantry Regiment, the Harlem Hellfighters, who fought on two fronts, as A. Philip Randolph stated, fighting for democracy abroad and against hypocrisy at home. These soldiers fought to show their bravery and patriotism to defend America, as well as to gain the respect and full rights as citizens free from racial discrimination. This park, the first to be named after an African-American in New York City, was named after Harlem Hellfighter Private First Class Dorrance Brooks, who fought and died heroically shortly before the signing of the armistice. When this park was dedicated in 1925 with over 10,000 people present, Mayor John Francis Hyland stated that, quote, "This square will speak to the present and future generations of the idealism, heroism, and patriotic duty of the colored man when danger threatened our country. Let us see in his sacrifice the obligation to strive for the victories of peace." As a testament to the importance of the 369th Infantry Regiment's great courage, selfless sacrifice, integrity, and fierce commitment, duty to fight for the American ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the Block Association has applied to have this square and the surrounding community placed on the National Register of Historic Places as the Dorrance Brooks Historic District. When the Harlem Hellfighters went to fight, they did so knowing fully that strict segregation laws and vigilante lynch mobs were the rule of the day, and when they returned victoriously from fighting, some were met with severe violence for simply exercising America's promise to freedom, democracy, and equality for all. The Red Summer of 1919 was called that because of the racial violence that faced these soldiers and many others, with some of the soldiers lynched in their uniforms. Harlem Renaissance poet Claude McKay wrote, "If we must die," in response to this horror. "If we must die, let it not be like hogs, hunted and penned in a glorious spot, while round us bark the mad and hungry dogs, making their mock at our accursed lot. If we must die, oh, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood may not be shed in vain. Then even the monsters we defy shall be constrained to honor us, though dead. O kinsmen, we must meet the common foe, though far outnumbered, let us show us brave, and for their 1,000 blows deal one death blow. What though before us lies the open grave? Like men, we'll face the murderous cowardly pack, pressed to the wall, dying but fighting back. Today we observe the end of the war to end all wars and to honor all Americans who fought and died bravely on behalf of democracy and freedom, and we especially honor those young men of Harlem who set the bar for generations to come with their bravery, their fight for civil and human rights, and the wonderful music they spread throughout the world. Thank you.
So we get this lineup, yes. Everybody, my band. Like I told you, this is a grassroots effort. I feel like the New York Giants for a minute. We forgot the national anthems. So, and we should have led that off first. So I guess there was too much going around, so we'll do that. And I promise I won't come back for the next centennial to do this again. Please stand, please stand.
The words of all the anthems are in your program.
The words for all of the anthems are in the program. We're going to,
Yellow packet.
and we have the French national anthem, the U.S. and look over. Okay, black, and they were all there on the second, on the third page. The third page. I'm sorry. Okay, let's go.
The French or the French?
Please have your seats, and thank you very much. We have several VIPs here, and here's Alan. Okay.
Good morning. I would like to introduce you Mrs. Anne-Claire Legendre, Consul General of France.
Thank you, Alan. Dear President, it's a great honor for me to be here on behalf of France and the French government and the French people to tell you how much we pay tribute to the memory of these young Americans that came to France in 1917. And they came in a moment of desperation when the French army was exhausted on the ground. We had lost already 1 million soldiers. People were dying in the trenches. And you came, you brought back hope, and you helped us turn the tide of war that made finally possible the armistice that we are celebrating today. In celebrating the American heroes that fought in the First World War, we celebrate the deep-rooted friendship between France and the United States. A friendship that was forged 2 centuries ago in the battles of Yorktown and Saratoga, when Rochambeau and Lafayette with the French troops came at a critical moment and helped the United States become independent. A friendship that was hardened in the difficult battles of La Marne and La Meuse and Bois-Belleau during the First World War. A friendship that continues in the battles of Normandy in the Second World War. And I have to say that this brotherhood of arms continues today, as we speak, in the fight against ISIL in the Levant and Africa, where French and American troops fight together alongside each other. In this long history of friendship, the Harlem Hellfighters clearly holds a very special place of honor. The Harlem Hellfighters fought more than any other American unit in the First World War and suffered more casualties. When the United States did not allow African Americans to serve in fighting units, France welcomed them. Under French command, the Harlem Hellfighters and French soldiers served together in the front lines in the treacherous trenches of the First World War. And the Harlem Hellfighters were the very first American unit to be decorated by the French command and receive our highest honor, the Croix de Guerre. So the Harlem Hellfighters are clearly an incredible symbol of honor and bravery, not just in the face of the terrors of war, but also in the face of crushing injustice. They risk, and often they lost their lives, to fight for liberty, democracy, and the rule of law in Europe, when back home they were not allowed to enjoy this very right. And I believe this is really an outstanding example of selflessness, of bravery, and also I believe of the strength of hope that came to fight as an equal in a critical battle for freedom. So what are the lessons we can draw from this long-lasting friendship, from this long-lasting brotherhood of arms in these 2 world conflicts and since the independence of this country? I believe the first lesson is that we cannot take liberty and democracy for granted and establish once for all. I believe this is also our responsibility on a daily basis to be vigilant and willing to mobilize to protect these values that we share. And moreover, this lesson that we can draw from these 2 conflicts is that it is together, it is because of the long-lasting alliance and friendship between our 2 countries that we finally overcame the forces that wanted to destroy democracies. So I believe the Harlem Hellfighters understood this better than anyone, because after fighting the war in Europe, they had to battle long and hard for the civil rights and their right to vote. And I can tell you that their example is an inspiration for all of us, and their memory is very vivid in France. And, you know, just a personal note, I'm born in Brest, which was the place where the Hellfighters landed in 1917, and I can tell you that, you know, their memory is inscribed in the streets of this city and my hometown. So thank you so much. And as we honor them, as we honor the veterans, as we honor all the ones that are fighting today in service, let us follow the exceptional example of this man and remember the lessons that can be drawn from their extraordinary endeavors, and so that history does not repeat itself. Thank you so much for having us.
We have Commissioner Lori Sutton, retired Brigadier General, U.S. Army. Say a few words. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What an inspiration to be here today with everyone here. Yes, the air is crisp, the breeze is brisk, and yet our hearts are warm. Our hearts are warmed, learning and celebrating and commemorating, and yes, as Madam Consul General, as you gave us so much to reflect upon, the heroism of our Harlem Hellfighters, the 369th Infantry Regiment. What a legacy. Going overseas, and as you said, Madam Consul General, to fight for the very rights, the very liberties, the very freedoms that they did not enjoy here at home. And that fight goes on today to preserve, to celebrate, to commemorate, and yes, to safeguard. I'm looking right now at Deputy Mayor Phil Thompson, whose grandfather, whose father, whose uncles all served in the military, and whose grandfather may well have served in the 369th Infantry Regiment. We're trying still to do the history to figure that out, but I'll tell you, whether or not he was actually with the 369th, he was there in spirit, and thank you so much, First Deputy Mayor Phil Thompson. God bless you and your family and all that you have done to serve. Give it up for Deputy Mayor Phil Thompson. One of the Harlem Hellfighters that I just wanted to recognize is Private Henry Johnson. He's a Harlem Hellfighter who was the Hellfighter of all Hellfighters. And his heroism, his sacrifice, his bravery was recognized by France. And later when he came home, he suffered the indignities of prejudice, of discrimination here on our own streets. So as we celebrate the service, the sacrifice of all of our veterans, let us not forget that freedom is not free, and that we are all in this together, whether we are any color, any creed, any race, any religion. We are from all walks of life. We are citizens in this great world who are committed and blessed to live in the land of the free because of the sacrifices of the brave. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator? Yes. We have our New York State Senator. And he's got some good words to say. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm New York State Senator Brian Benjamin. Thank you. First, I want to acknowledge a few people who are here today. Colonels Stephen Bosquet, Commander of the 369th, Honorable Keith Taylor, President of the Dorrance Park Property Owners Association, Colonel Charles Young, American Legion Post 398, Alain Dupuis, President Federation of the French War Veterans, Aries de la Cruz from the Governor's Office, Madam Consul General, and everyone who is here today. I was a couple minutes late because I was on the internet learning more about the Harlem Hellfighters. I watched a couple of clips, and I can't tell you, it was impossible to get out of my house to get here. Too many of the next generation, which I guess I consider myself part of, are not aware of the bravery and the heroism that is associated with this district right here in Harlem. I'm so proud to know that I am affiliated with the Harlem Hellfighters as the Harlem State Senator. And I also wanted to say, you took my Henry Johnson speech, so I'm gonna leave that alone. But the part that's very important to me, just want to add to that, was that when he came back and did not get any services, he came back injured. And so because he came back injured, he couldn't work. And because he couldn't work and he was not given any support from the government, he died penniless. And it's important that we make sure that that never happens again. If you go and fight for this country overseas, when you come home, you get the honor and dignity that you deserve. And that is something that is enormously important. I want to make sure that never happens again. So let me just say, because I got the words of the timing, on behalf of the New York State Senate, I just wanted to bring a proclamation and to recognize the bravery and the heroism and the legacy of the 369th Infantry Regiment, the Harlem Hellfighters. Yes, Colonel Bousquet, Boss K, I want to make sure I say that right. Bousquet, oh my God, it gave it to me wrong, I apologize. Colonel Bousquet, I just want to say, on behalf of the Village of Harlem, on behalf of myself as a senator, all of our elected officials, and on behalf of the governor of the state of New York, I wanted to present to you this proclamation for the 369th Infantry, and thank you for your service to our country. All right.
Thank you, Senator Benjamin. He's excited because he just got married. Well, let's take a picture real quick.
Our next speaker is Colonel Bousquet, who is the commanding officer of the 369th Sustainment Brigade. Colonel.
Good morning. Good morning. Distinguished guests, General James, Madam Secretary, Senator, and all those others that have come here today to honor the 369th and celebrate Veterans Day. It is a celebration because it celebrates the sacrifices of all those that came before us in uniform, that went out, served their country, and did so with honor in their heart, integrity in their actions, and with the knowing that they'd come back to a country that would take care of them at the end of the day. And they have done that. May not have started out that way, but in the end, through the efforts of those that are gathered here, our elected officials, they have done that. They've fulfilled that promise to the Harlem Hellfighters. I will tell you, as the commander of such a historic unit, I am honored to carry on the long traditions of that the Harlem Hellfighters have set forth. Being able to command this unit in combat, there's no greater honor to do. This unit has a legacy that is rich in tradition, in history, and everything that it has done. And I am fortunate to have been able to continue on that tradition and charge our soldiers within my brigade to continue to live those traditions and values and carry it forward. It's a historic day for me to be here with you. And again, just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for the Harlem Hellfighters. Hellfighter 6.
Our next speaker will be Mr. Alain Dupuy, President of the Federation of French War Veterans.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear comrades. It is my honor and privilege for the Federation of French War Veterans to have been invited to participate in your ceremony commemorating the dedication, achievement, and sacrifice of the 369th Infantry Regiment over 100 years ago, World War I. The fraternal bond between our two organizations began a century ago in my own France. The soldiers of the 369 Infantry Regiment fought to save the martyr province of Alsace, which was so dear to me. So too, their contribution to the liberation of Europe as a whole, with other American soldiers of the Allied Expeditionary Force commanded by General John J. Pershing. Every citizen in France, of France, should always remember the soldiers of the 369, the Harlem Hellfighters, the Harlem Rattlers, the Men of Bronze. The Zero fought alongside my countrymen, wearing the same uniform and using the same equipment. They fought as equals and brothers. We will always be proud of these great men. Our heroes, Private Needham Roberts and Henry Johnson, were awarded the Croix de Guerre and most recently received the Medal of Honor. It was a great honor, long delayed, and took a great effort to secure. There was never a doubt in my mind that they deserved those honors. Let me say again that France will never forget the magnificent service of the soldiers of the 369 Infantry Regiment. Our friendship is engraved in stone in our hearts. We have an indelible acknowledgement of gratitude, our parts for this body of American soldiers who fought to liberate Europe for 191 days of combat without yielding 1 inch of ground. Thank you.
We have the honor to have some students of the Lycée de New York to make a presentation today. Jean-Louis, can you introduce your students?
Good morning. Let me introduce you Léa, Anaïs, and Armand. They are students from the UNIS and the Lycée in New York, and they made a speech in the name of the French students in New York.
Messieurs les vétérans, Mesdames et Messieurs, we're meeting today to celebrate the centenary of the end of the First World War and to honor Harlem's 369 Infantry Regiment, the Harlem Hellfighters. This conflict is the world's first conflict and a turning point in the history of the 20th century. Just 100 years ago, peace put an end to what was then the biggest clash in history. Nearly 10 million soldiers died there. In this war, the Harlem Hellfighters fought alongside French soldiers from 1917. They are waging war on two fronts. The African-American warriors waged a military and symbolic war, and more particularly a war of opinion to convince their homeland that they are equal and that they have the same values as their white counterparts.
The participation of American soldiers alongside the French in the First World War is part of a long-standing friendship between our two peoples. The French had helped the Americans to become independent during the War of Independence, and later, the Americans helped the French in the second long First World War. 100 years later, we remember their histories and the strong ties shared by the Americans and the French. To remember is to commemorate peace, to be together, to bear a path to the general and environmental interest.
World
World War I and II were tragedies which unified those who fought on the trenches in Champagne. The horror and sacrifice that took place in this time of struggle will never be forgotten. We are here today on behalf of the Lycée Français de New York and the United Nations International School to express our gratitude and acknowledge the courage and resistance that resonated within each soldier that so bravely fought on behalf of the French people. The United Nations was created to ensure that a crisis like this one would never happen again. On the 10th of December in 1948 in France, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. The first article in this declaration states, "All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in spirit of brotherhood." This article is an example of reinforcement and creation of the sense of unity created on this battlefield, and still inspires us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, and thank you for braving the wind and the day, but we're getting there. And thank you very much. I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, and we're right up here on the hill in Hamilton Heights on 141st Street. And I was talking to some of I'm a retired colonel in the Air Force, and I asked a question if anyone knew James Bullard, Eugene Jacques Bullard. Has anyone ever heard of that name? And this was just last Saturday, and there must have been about 50 of us in the room, and nobody knew who he was. Okay, and I just want to speak to this hero for a few minutes, and this is definitely one that you go back to the internet and take a look at it. The advent of powered aviation was a new development to modern warfare. Many technological advances in weaponry, including the airplane, the machine gun, and communications, significantly affected modern warfare. Aviation was new, and like most opportunities, for lack of a better word, was denied to African Americans or Negroes or colored people. I would like to share some thoughts about Corporal Eugene Jacques Bullard, who is regarded as the first African American combat pilot and the second documented African American pilot. Does anybody know who the first one was? Bessie Coleman, a woman, African American woman. She was the first pilot in the United States. Okay, there are other pilots of color, including William Robinson Clark, a Jamaican, flying with the RAF in 1917, Ahmed Ali Selikin of Nigerian and African Turkish descent, flying with the Ottoman Air Force in 1916. Pierre Roujon of Martinique flew for France, and Domenico Mondelli from Eritrea flew for Italy. Eugene Bullard was born in Columbus, Georgia in 1895. His parents were expatriates of Haiti, which later enabled Eugene to join the French Foreign Legion after his arrival in Paris in 1914. He participated in the battles at the Somme, Champagne, and Verdun, where he was severely wounded in 1916. He served with the 170th French Infantry, known as the Black Swallows of Death. Upon his recuperation from his injuries, he became an aerial gunner and then a pilot. He flew his first combat mission on September 8th as a member of the Lafayette Flying Corps, which was a successor to the Lafayette Escadrille. The Lafayette Flying Corps was a name given to American volunteer pilots who flew for the French Air Force during World War I. It includes pilots who were with the bona fide Lafayette Escadrille Squadron. His aircraft's fuselage was inscribed "To le sang qui coule rouge." Did I get it right? Close? Okay. All blood runs red. All right, my French teachers would be very happy. Did I do okay, Jane? All right. So, and also, he was known as the Black Swallow of Death. Okay, but that came from, I think, the infantry, but that's what they called him when he flew. Unit flight records document that he flew 20 combat missions. He claimed 2 victories, which, however, remain undocumented. Okay, let me see. The United States entered World War I on April 6, 1917. A medical board was convened to examine recruits from the Lafayette Flying Corps. While many American volunteers were accepted into the United States Army Air Corps, Bullard was not one of those accepted. He was deemed unfit. Of course, the U.S. Army Air Corps would only accept white applicants. Bullard continued to serve in the French Air Force until he encountered a disagreement with a French officer. I was trying to sort of color up, not with that disagreement, but I was reminded last night by one member of the committee, Guy DeVoe, that he was a boxer. Okay, he was a professional boxer, and I don't think the other French officer was. And he was probably a superior too. He was subsequently removed from aviation duties and transferred to a French service battalion until the armistice in 1918. He received several military decorations, including the Croix de Guerre for his service and bravery. Eugene Bullard remained in France during the years between the wars. They call those the interwar years, of 1919 to 1940. He became a drummer and ultimately owned a nightclub, L'Escadrille. His circle of friends and acquaintances included prominent figures in the Harlem Renaissance. And by the way, where are we now? Okay, so that's something else that you want to take a look at. Josephine Baker, Louis Armstrong, Langston Hughes, and others. Eugene answered the call to arms when the Germans invaded France in May 1940. He was wounded while fighting with the French 51st Infantry Regiment. He returned to the United States in 1940 and was a resident of Harlem until his death on October 12, 1961, at age 66. He was relatively unknown in the United States. In 1954, he was one of 3 men rekindling the frame of the Arc de Triomphe, and in 1959, President Charles de Gaulle called him, this is where I go, un véritable héros français. Okay? a true French hero. I know I'm butchering that up. As he was named a chevalier, okay, a chevalier, a knight, and awarded both the Legion of Honor and the Médaille Militaire. Eugene Bullard was inducted into the Georgia Hall of Fame in 1994 and was also posthumously commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force, the successor service that rejected his service in World War I. Eugene Bullard completed his pilot training at Avord, France. I came across this note from someone who had a personal encounter with him. This writer will never forget the occasion when he was waiting at 23 Avenue du Bois to see Dr. Gross. Suddenly the door opened to admit a vision of military splendor such as one does not see twice in a lifetime. It was Eugene Bullard. His jolly black face shone with a grin of greeting and justifiable vanity. He wore a pair of tan aviator's boots which gleamed with a mirror-like luster, and above them his breeches smote the eye with a dash of vivid scarlet. His black tunic, excellently cut and set off a fine figure, was decorated with a pilot's badge, a Croix de Guerre, the Farraget of the Foreign Legion, and a pair of enormous wings, which left no possible doubt, even at a distance of 50 feet, as to which arm of the service he adorned. The Leaves, I know I'm misspelling that, and they were student pilots, gasped. The eyes of the neophytes stood out from their heads, and I repressed a strong instinct to stand at attention. There was scarcely an American at Avord who did not know and like Bullard. He was brave, loyal, and a thoroughly likable fellow. And when a quarrel with one of his superiors caused his withdrawal from the Aviation Corps, there was scarcely an American who did not regret the fact. He was sent to the 170th French Infantry Regiment in January 1918, from which date all trace of him had been lost. So, Eugene Bullard, a Harlem son, is buried in Flushing Cemetery in Queens, and he is honored by the government of France, the Federation of War Veterans, every year. The United States honors him. We honor his memory today. Vive la France! Vive Eugene Jacques Bullard. Thank you. Okay. We're going to hear from Dr. Jennifer Wingate from St. Francis College. Please. And after Dr. Wingate, if you have a paper with a list, could you come forward if you can, because we're going to read the names after that. Okay, Jennifer, thank you.
Thank you so much, Terry, for inviting me to this very special ceremony in Dorrance Brooks Park Square, Dorrance Brooks Square, named after Dorrance Brooks, a member of the 15th Regiment, reorganized as the 369th, known as the Hellfighters. The 369th were in the battle zone for an unprecedented 191 days without relief, a record unmatched by any other regiment during the war. In addition to honoring the service of all veterans and remembering the signing of the armistice today that ended the war 100 years ago, well, I'd like to say a few things about our remembrance of those events. After the armistice in 1918, it was still several months before U.S. servicemen returned home. The process of getting soldiers home was slow and hampered by logistical problems and planning failures. While the U.S. War Department undertook this immense effort, communities across the U.S. planned welcome home parades and other tributes. On February 19, 1919, 3,000 Hellfighters finally marched up Fifth Avenue from 23rd Street to 145th and Lenox. On that day, a crowd estimated at 2 million strong welcomed the heroes home, showering them with cigarettes, candy, and silver coins. The New York Tribune reported, "Up the wide avenue they swung. Their smiles outshone the golden sunlight. In every line, proud chests expanded beneath the medals valor had won." The impassioned cheering of the crowds massed along the way drowned the blaring cadence of their jazz band. The old 15th was on parade, and New York turned out to tender its dark-skinned heroes a New York welcome. And yet, after the celebratory moment, African-American veterans continued to fight discrimination. The period after World War I was a volatile one. In 1919 alone, there were 62 recorded lynchings of African Americans, and 10 of the victims were World War I veterans in uniform. James Baldwin wrote hauntingly of one such lynching in his 1953 book, Go Tell It on the Mountain. Richard Wright wrote, "Our black boys do not die for liberty in Flanders, they die in Texas and Georgia." W.E.B. Du Bois reported on the Hellfighters' homecoming parade. He wrote, "This country of ours, despite all its better souls have done and dreamed, is still a shameful land." Editor of the NAACP's journal, The Crisis, Du Bois had supported the involvement of African Americans in the World War. After the war, he wrote passionately about the need to keep fighting a battle for equality that had not yet been won. "We are cowards," Du Bois proclaimed in the pages of The Crisis in May 1919. "If now that the war is over, we do not marshal every ounce of our brain and brawn to fight a sterner, longer, more unbending battle against the forces of hell in our own land. We return from fighting, we return fighting." Du Bois filled the pages of The Crisis with photographs of uniformed African American veterans, understanding that dignified representations of black soldiers were part of that fight. But where are the representations of black soldiers and veterans in public space, in the public commemorative landscape of the nation? 2 congressional bills were introduced for 2 different national memorials to African American soldiers, but were never approved by the body that oversaw national monuments in D.C. Explaining his opposition to a bill authorizing a memorial in France, the African American 93rd Division, a Democratic representative from Maryland, argued that no discrimination should be made between the races. Monuments should be erected for American soldiers regardless of color. But they weren't. Monuments speak loudest by what they don't say or what they don't represent sometimes. Even when monument honor rolls included the names of African American soldiers, sometimes on segregated honor rolls, their sculpted figures did not portray black doughboys. The most popular forms of commemorative tribute after World War I were sculptures of fighting infantrymen nicknamed doughboys. They shored up Americans' confidence in the manhood of returning veterans and helped dispel fears about the mental and physical health and economic prospects of returning soldiers. When Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood dedicated a column to commemorate Illinois' Black 8th Regiment, the French-American sculptor Leonard Crunel modeled 3 beautiful larger-than-life relief sculptures to decorate the memorial. The panels depict an African-American soldier, an African-American allegory of motherhood, and a female personification of Columbia holding a tablet with the names of the regiment's battles. The memorial, completed in 1928, was lovely, but where was the fighting soldier? The Chicago Defender reported that it was not truly representative of a fighting unit, that it was too passive. In response, the sculptor added a bronze, in-the-round sculpture of an African-American doughboy in 1936. The addition reflected not only the national urge to pay homage to the warrior ideal, but also the pressing need to recognize the manhood of African Americans who served bravely in the war as combat soldiers. There are only a few such black doughboy sculptures in the entire country, and none in New York City. However, there were artists, including the Harlem-based sculptor Augusta Savage, who were working to change how the Great War was pictured and remembered. Some artists who were pacifists chose not to make war memorials at all. Some, like the African-American sculptor Meta Vo Fuller, made several small sculptural sketches and models that were never enlarged into monumental form for reasons related to the complicated process and political nature of public art. Savage dedicated herself to the art community in Harlem and to sculpting African-American subjects. Her works entered private collections and museums, but few were realized as public monuments. Her most famous sculpture, the harp, inspired by James Weldon Johnson's hymn, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," was erected in plaster at the 1939 World's Fair. She was a powerful figure in the New Negro movement who founded an art academy in Harlem in 1932, and that same year the Works Projects Administration appointed her the first director of the Harlem Community Art Center. In 1937, Savage modeled a 7.5-foot group of a mother, widowed daughter, and son called After the Glory. Intended to commemorate the World War I service of the 15th Regiment, and to be cast in bronze and erected on a granite pedestal. This is it. It was intended to be dedicated in Rucker Park, what is today Rucker Park, at 155th Street and 7th and 8th Avenues. But the monument was never realized. A photograph of the back of the full-size plaster model exists in the collection of the Schomburg Center. In the photo, the viewer can only see the back of the monumental draped form of the mother, her arm around the back of a second smaller figure, presumably her widowed daughter, whose head is bowed in grief. The photo is frustrating because we want to see more. We want to see Savage's tribute to the 15th Regiment from the front to see each of the 3 figures. We want to see what the sculpture would look like cast in bronze. Looking at the photograph, we're invited to imagine what it would look like on its granite pedestal in a park in Harlem. We're invited to imagine what if there were more World War I memorials that featured mothers and grieving widows rather than fighting soldiers. This is only one of the reasons why coming together to honor the past, to revisit and rewrite histories is so important. Because the process invites us to continue to imagine a better future, inspired by those we pay tribute to. Thank you.
Thank you. General James is here, but you know it's cold, so he's in the car. So afterwards, go over there and say hi. So we got his son, come swing by, Honey Lamb.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here they come. Here they come. After being insulted by the mayor of Spartanburg, South Carolina, and the people of New Jersey, and standing up in Long Island against an Alabama unit who was also being trained there. They were going to be attacked by the Alabama unit when the commander issued the order, "If you are fired upon, then return fire." That cooled the whole thing down. This order was issued by Hamilton Fish, a new congressman after the war. Here they come, departing from Hoboken, New Jersey on a steamship called the Pocahontas. Shipwrecked 3 times. Once after leaving port, the ship's boilers broke down and had to be towed back to port. Then they collided with another ship, but they repaired the damage. And then on the third crash with a British tanker, which they repaired on the damage on the way. Here they come, arriving in France at the port of Brice-Aguirre and ready for war. Once again, they were told they had to serve as labor forces. Colonel Haywood objected and said, "I didn't bring these boys over here to be a labor force. If they can't fight, send us home." With that remark, they were assigned to the French army. They were greeted with open arms. Here they come, the 369th Heavy Foot Infantry, heavy foot, not because they had big feet, but because they had heavy weapons and marched all the way. The first to the Rhine River, the first to cross into Germany. One of the most decorated units in the Great War. They won more decorations than any other unit. They were the first to march under the Arch of the Triumph upon their return home and a parade up through Harlem. Thank you for your service, everyone.
Hello everybody, my name is Alex Rico. I'm the flotilla commander for the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary Flotilla that's based up here. I just want to say thank you for everybody for coming. The auxiliary is the uniformed volunteer service of the U.S. Coast Guard. We're honored to participate today. I'd like to introduce Aries de la Cruz from the Governor's Office and thank him for coming down here today.
I live a few blocks away, so it wasn't really quite that hard. Hi everyone, my name is Aries de la Cruz. I am the Governor's Manhattan Regional Representative. I'm also a member of the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. I'll make my remarks short, but for the people who have worn the uniform, they deserve we owe them our thanks, and we owe them our respect, and most importantly, we owe them our freedom. Veterans Day often comes just a few days after Election Day. It's been a very divisive one the past few years, but when Americans look to something that looks to unify them, I really think about Veterans Day and the people who serve our country in many different ways, and wearing the uniform, but also people like Commissioner Sutton, Senator Benjamin, the Colonel, and the people of the Dorrance Brooks Association who do everything they can to make sure that the injustices that the Harlem Hellfighters experienced never happen to anyone else ever again. We can't undo those injustices, but we can work every day to make things better and to make things right. And so I have a letter here from the Governor to all of you. He was not able to make it because of a scheduling conflict. 1 second. This is what he wanted me to say to all of you. Dear friends, it is a pleasure to send greetings to everyone gathered for today's observance. It's been 100 years since the Armistice of Compiègne was signed, bringing an end to the conflict on land, sea, and air during World War I, a time when many courageous New Yorkers were fighting to uphold our freedom, democracy, and the founding values of our great nation. Among those courageous New Yorkers was the Harlem Hellfighters, who suffered the most losses of any American regiment, with 1,500 casualties, while they fought to defend America as well as their right to live free of racial discrimination. Today you come together in Dorrance Brooks Square Park, named for the Harlem native son who lost his life fighting in 1918, just days before the armistice was signed, to pay solemn tribute to the heroism, patriotism, and sacrifice of our New York veterans. Thank you to all who helped organize this observance in honor of the thousands of brave individuals who served in World War I. We owe them a debt of gratitude, and today's event allows us to convey our profound respect and appreciation. Sincerely, the 56th Governor of New York, Andrew M. Cuomo. And we also have a few proclamations from him. I won't read it all, but it's for this specific day. Whereas World War I was one of the bloodiest and costliest conflicts in human history, claiming 17 million lives between 1914 and 1918, including those of more than 116,000 United States troops. More than 500,000 New Yorkers served in the American Expeditionary Forces under General Pershing, fully 10% of the U.S. troops, and they fought with courage and determination. Whereas New York State regiments were honored for their selfless sacrifice and courage, including the 69th Infantry Regiment, known as the Fighting 69th, and the 369th Infantry Regiment, called the Harlem Hellfighters, or the Black Rattlers, the first African-American regiment to serve in combat during World War I. 25 New Yorkers received the Congressional Medal of Honor for their valiant service in World War I. Whereas New Yorkers joined to recognize the members of the Commission and their work to further the public engagement with the legacy of New York State and New Yorkers who actively served and fought in World War I. And up until November 11, 2018, the centennial of the signing of the armistice to end active fighting, we likewise extend appreciation to the World War I Centennial Anniversary Commemoration Commission members for their efforts to collaborate with federal, state, and local governments, public and private resources, and other entities to promote a wide variety of programs to commemorate the legacy of World War I. Whereas the last of the surviving individuals who served in World War I are gone, we will forever look to the example set by those New Yorkers of heroism and self-sacrifice, a proud example that inspires all of us and that lives on in the generations of their family members who followed them. Now therefore I, Governor Andrew M. Cuomo, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim November 11th as a day to honor and remember the sacrifices made by New York State and New Yorkers in World War I and the Empire State, as we mark the centennial of the signing and an end to the active fighting in World War I, an event of such great consequence to global humankind. Governor Andrew M. Cuomo. I would like to ask members of the Poverty Association and the association to come to the dais to receive the proclamation.
Come on, homo, let's get up. Come over here, come on.
Well, it's all right, it's all right.
Can you want stepping in? Of course, sir.
Closer together.
You want to get close? It's cold.
Right, you on the end. A little tighter on the end. A little tighter on the end. Big smile. Beautiful day. Big smiles. You good? Thank you.
Thank you for that.
We have everyone lined up? Okay. All right, so what we'll do at this point, we're going to have a reading of all of the names of the 369th personnel who were killed in action in World War I. Then we'll have the benediction from the chaplain from the 369th, and that'll conclude our program. Okay?
Be careful.
Charles M. Alexander, George Allardyce, Frank Allen, Wallace Allen, Houston Anderson, James A. Anderson, John Anderson, Lake Anderson, Reed T. Anderson, Alfred Andrews, James Axon, James J. Bailey, Roy Baker, Melver W. Barron, Hilliard Baskerville, Fletcher Battle, Lewis M. Baylor, Sims Belcher, and Edward Bell.
James Bell,
Theodore R. Bell, John Betha, Henry G. Black, Isaac Black, Lester Bowe, Bun Boyd, Harvey C. Brewster, Dorrance Brooks, George T. Brown, Henry Brown, Joe Brown, Thomas W. Brown, Frank Brunson, Louis G. Bryant, Rossi Bryant, Elmer Butcher, Cleveland Berman, Thomas L. Burnett, William Campbell.
Richard Cannon, John Ray Carter, Otto Chapman, Arthur Chandel, Willie Chester, Russell Chin, Walter Clay, Paul Clendenin, Chris Clarkson, Frederick Cobb, Adolphus Cook, Will Cooper, Robert Cousin, Dorsey Covington, Crawford Cruz, James Cruz, Charlie Curry, James Dancy, John Dancy, Eugene Davis.
George Davis, Powell Davis, Charles Dean, Richard Dees, Frederick Dempsey, Milton DeSalle, Walter Dixon, James Darden, Abraham Douglas, Henry Douglas, James Drumgold, Sylvester Duckett,